And we're very happy to be joined by Michael Eisenberg, a venture capitalist and author of the new book, The Tree of Life and Prosperity. Hello, and thanks for joining us. It's been a long time.
It has. Thank you for having me, Emily.
And congratulations. I know this is, an accomplishment of epic proportions. You've worked on it a long time while running a business, raising 8 kids, being a husband, and investing in companies. I mean, how, first of all, do you find the time to do it all? That's the part I don't understand.
How do you find the time? I don't have that many hobbies, I guess, is probably part of it. My hobby is writing books. I've been saying about myself recently, I really only know how to do 2 things, or really one thing: write checks and write books. So write checks as an investor, and write books. And just been very gratifying to see the response to the books. And you write a book in order to start a conversation and get feedback and hopefully change the zeitgeist, and I've been gratified by that.
Right. Well, obviously, it's already happening, because I know you just have gotten accolades already as far as, being recognized as one of the best new releases in the business space, right?
In the last 24 hours, the book has hit #1 new release in business ethics and #1 new release in Old Testament commentaries.
Wow.
On Amazon, and is in like the top 4,000 or so books on Amazon. And today's launch day, and so super excited by that, and just super gratified by the response to the book by a wide variety of people. Jewish people, non-Jewish people, religious people, not religious people, tech CEOs, investors, business people, Harvard professors, and journalists. It's just been super gratifying.
Well, it just goes to show that there is truth in the Torah and in what our biblical ancestors were able to build. And explain kind of how you're able to extrapolate kind of the stories from Genesis, namely in this book, into kind of the narrative of business then, and how it applies to where we are now.
That's really a great question. So every commentary on the Torah, on the Bible, brings their own baggage. I'm fond of saying that Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra was a poor man, and he looked at the Bible through a poor man's lens. And Isaac Dona Barbanel, the finance minister of Portugal and Spain, when the Jews were expelled in 1492, hates the monarchy, and it's understandable why. My lens is innovation, venture capital, investments, and economics, and that's what I took out from the text. And this book started as table conversations around our Shabbat table with our children. And so everyone brings their own baggage to it, and if you look not so hard, by the way, you find that business and financial success and how one deals with wealth and innovation is literally in every portion of the Bible.
You hear all of these anecdotes, and it's, you learn a lot in the study of, spirituality, that, you're looking at the dollar, and it really is an energy, and that your relationship you have for your own self-worth is often a reflection of, what you draw toward you and how you conduct your life and business.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that Rabbi Benny Lau said to me when I published this book in Hebrew the first time, someone asked him, "What did you learn from the book?" He said, "I learned that people are people. And people 4,000 years ago had to deal with businesses, and had to deal with family, and had to deal with people who wanted to take their business from them, and how do you innovate in times of stress, whether it was Noah who innovated the plow, or Joseph who innovated storage. And people are people, and 4,000 years hasn't changed that, but the timeless wisdom of the Bible is unbelievably pertinent, particularly in chaotic times." And I think we all feel that the times around us, what's going on in Afghanistan recently, but not only, times are chaotic, and we need timeless anchors. And I think the Bible has stood the test of 4,000 years as a timeless anchor in swirling waters.
Right, and listen, the bedrock of every nation around the world, as Abraham was the father of all nations. So it is the bedrock of, even though maybe not everybody knows throughout history, it is the bedrock of all religions.
So there's kind of 2 points there. One is, we think we've kind of scaled up everything now, and that Google and Facebook have more unique users than anyone. Turns out that the Bible has more unique users than anybody in the history of humankind. And that's important to say. There's been more commentaries written on its rich text. And I think that's super important. A friend of mine, Balaji Srinivasan, said, when I look at your book, it's wisdom of the ancients for moderns, and that wisdom is still pertinent today.
Wow. I guess let's just start in the Garden of Eden, because there's so many examples of biblical stories that are reflective of business and the moral realities, ethical realities, and non-realities we're dealing with today. So it starts in the Garden of Eden. Explain.
So, amazingly, when you look at the Garden of Eden, we think of this as some idyllic place, and it's not actually. Why do we know it's not? Because Adam and Eve have no children in the Garden of Eden. Children are only born once they're outside the Garden of Eden. And when I look at the story of the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve, what I see is the same modern proposition being made today recently by Ilhan Omar and Elon Musk, people as disparate as that, saying we need to provide universal basic income to people. Universal basic income is an idea around for generations where if we just give people subsistent incomes, they will do amazing things. Well, in my view, the Garden of Eden proves that people don't do amazing things when everything is provided for them or their basic sustenance is. God grows all the trees there and it provides basic sustenance. Only when man is expelled from the Garden of Eden because they're so bored that Eve is talking to the serpent, does man begin to work hard. And when he begins to work hard, he creates bread. From the sweat of his brow, he creates bread. He makes something. And only when he makes bread and battles with the thorns and thistles does he have children and create a new generation. Man needs work not just to earn a living, but to be productive and feel productive. And there's no bigger productivity and creativity than having children. So children only exist outside the Garden of Eden. And if we needed proof of this, by the way, COVID's proven it. Because we gave out checks to people and said, they'll come back to work. They don't come back to work when you give them checks. And so we had a living proof of the Garden of Eden. And I realize it's been tough psychologically. It was lonely in the Garden of Eden too, which is why Eve speaks to the serpent. She's lonely. They got nothing to do together. And so this, I think, an important lesson is super applicable to modern times. This idea of universal basic, it's just a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, even in Kabbalah, it's a saying, bread of shame. When you're giving something to somebody for free without earning it, in a way, there's a resentment that builds up. And it's interesting, just getting back from the United States, that's the biggest thing I noticed is restaurants, there's not a lot of employees. People are not going back to work, which doesn't help the economy as a whole.
No, absolutely not.
Wow.
You need people to work.
Yeah, and let's talk about, you use an example of the Tower of Babel being, technology being connected to the Tower of Babel. Explain.
So in the introduction to the book, I look at the Tower of Babel. Tower of Babel, we understand it is the place where God scattered the people. What we forget is the first part of the story, which is that everyone gathers in a valley to make for themselves a name, and there's one language and one platform for creativity, the tower. And this is a collection of humanity in one place, and it doesn't lead to any good. And God walks in and says, we better scatter these people. He actually doesn't destroy the tower. He scatters the people and confuses or scatters their tongues.
Spell in Hebrew is to confuse.
Exactly. And so we think about tech platforms today. These have also become places where you can constrain free speech and constrain difference. So we have a big challenge of deplatforming now, which is certain voices are being deplatformed, taken off platforms like Facebook or Google, et cetera. And Amazon has banned some books. And so we can't have this. And so what we need to do is scatter this. The best way to scatter it, if building a tower were the tools of the Tower of Babel, the current tower is data. And so we need to give people back their data, their language, what they own, and scatter social profiles around so people can make them portable and take them to where they want so they don't run a risk of being deplatformed.
Wow, very interesting. And let's talk about Noah, another powerful, important lesson. And, we knew he became a drunkard and made vineyards after, but, creating the plow, that's not learned in everyday Hebrew school.
Yeah, actually, most people don't even remember that he got drunk, too. They think of Noah as the guy who built the ark and saved humanity. But the kind of bookending stories of Noah is that there was a generation. There was a Thomas Malthus. For those who don't know, Thomas Malthus was an Anglican priest who said the world is coming to an end. We have no food to feed people. This is a couple hundred years ago. We're still around, right? So the world gets better, but there are always doomsayers. Maureen Dowd has become like a doomsayer about climate change, et cetera. But what happens is there's always some younger generation that comes along and invents something to improve output. So Thomas Malthus of Noah's time was Jared 5 generations earlier, said, stop having kids. There's no food. And then Noah invents the plow. And after Noah, humanity explodes in a positive sense. People start having children, but with that abundance comes corruption. And so the challenge the Bible is presenting is innovation is great, the plow is great, and abundance is great, but how we handle it ethically, principally, is a big challenge. The same is true of the drunken story of Noah. Noah leaves the ark and he invents fermentation. He plants a vineyard and makes wine. Now, wine is the water of the ancients because it was clean, it had alcohol. And Noah invents this amazing thing for humanity. Clean water, that's wine. And it could be used to gladden the heart, but instead he uses it to drink himself to a drunken stupor, and he's abused by his son Ham. And so the lesson of Noah is innovation is great. It increases abundance. It saves humanity. It propels it forward. But it doesn't have timeless principles, it goes wayward. And the same is true of artificial intelligence, and the same is true of synthetic biology, and the same is true of autonomous vehicles. We have innovation at a pace we've never had before. But if we don't put timeless principles alongside of it, it can go awry.
Congratulations on all of the success. You're going to be helping a lot of people.
Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Now
And
make all 8
this is
kids
your
read
copy.
it. Thank you. I'm going to read it.